Connect multiple devices simultaneously. Internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber. Connect multiple devices simultaneously. Internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber.
Tomex. Fellam sa visavija avama kar dina 3ක් දක්වා ටොයිලට් එක ෆ්‍රෙෂ්ව තමයි. Tomex.
Tonight, expert opinion. Pressure mounts on the government to seek IMF assistance.
Homegrown solution is not working.
And people vote, that's a 69 million people, voted against that. They don't want to go to the IMF.
Medical mafia. The GMOA awaits written assurance from the government to end the strike. But even the former Good Governance Health Minister insists that the government is right. The protracted saga. Qingdao Sewin Biotech's third-party test report allegedly gives the thumbs up for the controversial fertilizer shipment. A long way to go. Global health authorities sees no end to COVID just yet.
We can't go into an endemic situation, part of the world where the rest of the world is dealing with this in a pandemic type situation. There will be a long transition into how this pandemic ends.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9 this Thursday, the 23rd of December 2021.
Nelly මතකෙන් ගිලිහුණු black shiny කෙස් කලඹක රහස sunsilk black shine සමගින්.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening. Welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammik Ekanaik. Now, the economic experts are calling on the government to seek IMF assistance to tackle the country's economic situation. Speaking to Indi Viryamwatha on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena, said that this should be the way forward as homegrown solutions have not proved to be successful. Meanwhile, also during the talks, Senior Professor of the Department of Economics at the University of Colombo, Atula Ranasinghe, noted that even though this might be the case, the people voted for a government that is anti-IMF.
Is going to the IMF a real solution? Because the current government believes in a homegrown solution.
There's a political economy problem with the government, because you may remember that by the time of election, the main slogan of the government in the election time was the kind of a anti-IMF slogan. So they didn't want to go to IMF. True, we have shrinking government argument, that's to reduce the government activities and the employment, and also various compensations, various subsidy policies, and exchange rate policy, all has to be relaxed if you go with the IMF. So that's that cost. But at the same time, the alternatives are either to go to some other commercial borrowings or go for mega investments. Now, the question I have is, are we in a conducive environment to attract mega projects to Sri Lanka? Now, you see, day before yesterday, we just have shocking news about this Fitch rating. We are down in the Fitch rating. Now, investors come to Sri Lanka or any other country for that matter, looking at these statistics. If they see that Sri Lanka is in sort of a financial crisis situation, according to the Fitch ratings and other international ratings, I have doubt that whether we can attract investors that soon. So that's that challenge. But that is also option. So government has to try it. But the problem is that now, if we go to the IMF, we have to go by their conditions. And people vote, that's a 69 million people, voted against that. They don't want to go to the IMF. That's why they voted for that in this election. So do people like to take that challenge? Do people like to have the exchange rate relaxation, and which definitely boost up the dollar value? Now there is also a political game behind. All other political parties in the scene, except JVP, had been working with IMF, but up to now, apart from few individual parliamentarians, there is no any official statement that we should go to the IMF. If the government go with them, there's another clash that they start, criticizing and fighting against government for going for the IMF.
I'd like to turn to Dr. Vijayawardena. Is going to the IMF at this stage, you say it's the last resort, but again the same question, the government wants to look for a homegrown solution. Is that possible?
I have heard this bold statement being pronounced by many politicians that they have a homegrown solution. Unfortunately, today the head of the central bank is telling us that he has a homegrown solution. What we observe as independent economists, that homegrown solution is not working. because the homegrown solution was, introduced in December 2019, when Sri Lanka's reserve position was around $7 billion. From that day onward, the homegrown solution had actually allowed the reserve levels to fall, and today it has fallen to the lowest level possible within the recent history of Sri Lanka.
Do you think from 2019, with the COVID situation, the government had sufficient time and space to implement this homegrown solution?
The economic policies should be flexible. Even in December 2019, our observation was that Sri Lanka's economy was not in good health. It had been deteriorating from around year 2013. Growth rate had been falling. Public debt has been rising. External debt has been rising. Specifically, the money borrowed from the commercial sources has been rising. Inflation was rising up again in the country. So therefore, it was an ideal situation for Sri Lanka to seek IMF support in December, immediately after the present government was voted to power. The COVID-19 pandemic hit Sri Lanka only in February 2020, but in our view, the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak has been the best situation for Sri Lanka to seek IMF assistance, because IMF has been giving the debt relief facilities for the member countries, and Sri Lanka had never applied for that debt relief facility. In my view, if we go to IMF today, it will take about 6 months time for us to get a negotiated loan facility, and by that Sri Lanka's situation will be pretty much worse, and we will not be able to recover from it.
What is the short to mid-term solution for Sri Lanka?
In the short run, we need foreign exchange to meet our foreign exchange commitments. If we take the total commitments that we have within the next 12-month period, in respect of the repayment of external debt and payment of interest, we need about $7.2 billion within the next 12-month period. Then the central bank is, boasting about the increase in the exports without thinking of the rise in the import. They're actually talking about the gross inflows and not the net inflows. So if we take the entirety of the current account on the balance of payments, that will be in deficit by about, say, $5 billion within the next 12-month time period. So we need another $12 billion in order to overcome this particular liquidity problem that we are having today. For that purpose, it is necessary Sri Lanka to have this mega type of foreign exchange inflow into the country. For that purpose, what the central bank can do is to get the IMF support first, build up confidence among the foreign investors in Sri Lanka, in the government's sovereign bonds, and finally to use the short-term facilities that it is seeking after from the friendly central bank. So this is what it has do, but in the long run solution depends on our reforming Sri Lanka's economy, which is a must in the case of an IMF facility, allowing businesses to thrive, and also at the same time getting Sri Lanka linked to the rest of the global economy through an effective supply chain connection.
නියම ක්වලිටියට හැදෙන අලුත් ටියාරා රස පදමට අලුත් වෙලා.
Former Minister of Health Dr. Rajitha Senaratne praised the Minister of Health today for his efforts to tackle what he termed GMOA mafia in the country's health sector. In the meantime, the Government Medical Officers Association itself says that the strike will continue until written assurance is given by them or given to them by the Ministry of Health on their demands, which consist of 7.
Today is the third consecutive day in which patients at some hospitals were inconvenienced as a result of the island-wide strike launched by the Government Medical Officers Association. The GMOA wants the government to meet 7 demands to stop the strike. Out of those demands, they want post-internship medical appointments given through the transfer board. Some patients who had come from miles were not offered any help at hospitals at which the strike is in effect. In contrast, however, the operations of the Bogawan Talawa Divisional Hospital and the District Hospital of Gampha continued.
ගම්පහ දිස්ත්‍රික් මහ රෝහලේ රෝගී සත්කාරක සේවාවල අඩාලවීමක් පිළිබඳව කිසිදු පැමිණිල්ලක් මේ වන විට ලැබිලා නැහැ.
Meanwhile, addressing the media, the GMOA said that their strike will continue until the required confirmation is given by the Ministry of Health.
ඊයේ සවස් කාලයේදී සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යතුමා සහ සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයේ නිලධාරීන් සමග රජ වෛද්‍ය නිලධාරීන්ගේ සංගමය සාකච්ඡා පැවැත්වුණා. මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ලිඛිත ප්‍රකාශයක් ඉදිරිපත් වනතුරු අපිට මේ අවස්ථාවේදී වර්ජනය අවසන් කිරීමේ හැකියාවක් නැහැ.
As it had been the case for over the past 2 days, not all medical trade unions agree with the latest conduct of the GMOA.
වෛද්‍යවරුන් අතර තිබෙන්නේ රජයේ වෛද්‍ය නිලධාරී සංගමයේ නැමැති මාෆියාව ගැන බියවීමක්. ඒ බියවීම නිසා තමයි මේගොල්ලන්ගේ වර්ජනයට යම්කිසි දායකත්වයක් සුළු වෛද්‍යවරුන් ප්‍රමාණයක් දෙන්නේ. මාරු මණ්ඩලයක කිසි විටකවත් වෘත්තීය සමිතියක් පාර්ශ්වකාරය වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක ආයතන සංග්‍රහය අනුව මාරු මණ්ඩලයේ නිරීක්ෂකයෙක් හැටියට සහභාගී වෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි පහුගිය ටිකේ උනේ නිරීක්ෂකයෙක් හැටියට සහභාගී වෙන්න ඕන කට්ටිය සම්පූර්ණ මාරු මණ්ඩලයේම ග්‍රහණයට නතු කරගෙන තමුන්ට ඕන ඒවා කළා. වෛද්‍ය කර්මයේ යෙදෙන්නේ නැතුව, ශල්‍ය කර්මයේ යෙදෙන්නේ නැතුව, වැඩ කරන්නේ නැතුව මාරුවීම් වැඩවලට, කොම්පියුටර් වැඩවලට වෛද්‍යවරු සෙට් එකක් ඔතන ඉන්නවා. ඇතැම් රෝහල් වලට වෛද්‍යවරු නැතුව ඉන්නවා. අන්න දැන් මේ මාෆියා අත අයින් කරන්න ඇමතුමා යම්කිසි ක්‍රියාමාර්ගයක් අරගෙන තියෙනවා වගේ පේනවා. ඒකට තමයි මේ කලබල වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. රාජ්‍ය සේවා කොමිසම තමයි පත් කිරීම බලධාරිය. ඒතකොට රාජ්‍ය සේවා කොමිසමට අනවශ්‍ය ඇඟිලි ගැහිම් කිරීම වරදක්. වෘත්තීය සමිති ආවරණයකුත් නැතුව. මොකද අධිකරණ ක්‍රියාමාර්ගවලට ලක් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. රජයේ වෛද්‍ය නිලධාරී සංගමයක් අලුතෙන් පත් උනේ නැහැ පහුගිය අවුරුද්ද. කවුරුත් පත් උන්නේ නැහැ, නඩුවක් විතරයි තියෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා මේක සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම කොයි පැත්තෙන් බැලුවත් ඊටාම වැරදි ක්‍රියාමාර්ගයක්.
In the meantime, even former Minister of Health Dr. Rajitha Senaratne, who held the portfolio under the government of good governance, seemed to back the Health Ministry's move.
මුලින්ම සීමාවාසික වෛද්‍යවරයෙක් විදියට පත් කරන්නේ. ඒ පත් කරන්නේ කොහොමද? අවසාන විභාගයේදී තමන්ගේ ලකුණු ගත්ත විදියට තමයි තමන්ට කියනවා රෝහල් ඉල්ලන්නේ. ඒ රෝහල් ලබා දෙන්නේ ඉල්ලපු හැටියට තමන්ගේ උඩ ඉඳලා පහළටම ලකුණු අනුව. වෙන කිසිම ක්‍රමවේදයක් නැහැ. ඉතින් ඕක කරන්න යූනියන් ඕනේ නැහැ. එතකොට මෙතෙන්දී මේ අමාත්‍යාංශය ගත්ත ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය නිවැරදි. මේ 4-5 දිනකගේ උවමනාව පිට මේ මාෆියාව මර්ධනය කරන්නට රටක් නැගිටින්න ඕනේ. ප්‍රාදේශීය වශයෙන් මිනිස්සු නැගිටලා රෝහල් වලට ගිහිල්ලා මේගොල්ලන්ට උත්තර දෙන්න ඕනේ.
The Commercial High Court of Colombo today said that the decision with regards to the extension or the revoking of the court order issued preventing People's Bank from making payments to Qingdao Siyun Biotech will be announced on the 6th of January. In the meantime, the Chinese company says that a Singaporean lab report obtained by them has proven that the fertilizer stock Sri Lanka rejected is free of harmful bacteria.
The Ministry of Agriculture rejected 20,000 metric tons of organic fertilizer provided by Chinese company Qingdao Siyun Biotech as a test conducted by the National Plant Quarantine Service using 2 fertilizer samples found harmful bacteria in it. However, recently, the Attorney General's department advised that both parties arrive at a consensus on agreeable commercial conditions for the matter to be resolved. Upon the Attorney General's advice, the government also decided to pay $6.7 million to Qingdao Siyun Biotech as per the letter of credit. Though the government decided to pay $6.7 million, the $5 million performance bond the company gave to the island will not be released until a new shipment of organic fertilizer which is in compliance with Sri Lankan standards is received. Throughout the process, the government refused to entertain third-party test reports on samples from the initial fertilizer shipment, insisting that only tests that matter are the ones done by the National Plant Quarantine Service. In this backdrop, Qingdao Siyun Biotech has obtained a third-party test report with regard to the fertilizer that the company shipped to Sri Lanka. The company says that the test report provided by a Singaporean laboratory has confirmed that no plant, animal or human pathogens including Erwinia was detected in the samples. In the meantime, on the 23rd of October, the Commercial High Court in Colombo issued an injunction against People's Bank from making the payments as per the terms of the letter of credit opened on behalf of Qingdao Siyun Biotech. When the case was taken up today, Commercial High Court Judge Pradeep Hettiarachchi said that the extension or the revoking of the court order will be announced on the 6th of January. Until then, the court order preventing payment to Siyun Biotech stays in effect.
We'll see you shortly. Stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, the World Health Organization says that there is still no need for the world to look for Omicron-specific vaccines to be developed as the jabs in circulation provide enough immunity. Chief Scientist of the WHO, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, noted that even though preliminary studies showed that the neutralization antibody response was low in vaccines, other studies have showed that the T-cell response was quite high.
The spread of the Omicron variant is gaining momentum just as much as the Delta variant did, but in a shorter span of time. The World Health Organization says the growth rate of the variant has been exponential, as it has now infiltrated over 106 countries worldwide. Even though Omicron has become the dominant variant in a few countries, Researchers and the global health body says that it hasn't become the dominant variant across the world yet. Delta, a variant of concern, is still the dominant variant. This poses another issue, as the other variants of concern, Alpha, Beta and Gamma, only account for a fraction of the world's COVID cases. With that, could it mean that the pandemic can become endemic to certain areas of the globe?
We have actually been having some discussions about whether we need to reclassify alpha, beta, and gamma to change them from being called a variant of concern to maybe a variant of interest, or they become variants of monitoring, strictly because they're not circulating anymore and because Delta has outcompeted those variants. You've been hearing us say that Delta would not be the last variant of concern that we would speak about. Omicron is likely not going to be the last variant of concern that you hear us speak about as well, because the virus continues to circulate. I don't think there's any question of whether or not this virus will become endemic. It's certainly on its way to doing so. But endemic doesn't mean that it's not dangerous, Endemic typically means that it has a lower level of circulation and it's really geographically bound to certain areas, and you'll see flare-ups where you see unprotected populations. And I think we're on our way to that. I don't think anyone questions that. But we're very much still in the middle of a pandemic. And we can't go into an endemic situation in part of the world where the rest of the world is dealing with this in a pandemic type situation. So I think there will be a long transition into how this pandemic ends, into how we get into what SARS-CoV-2 will look like going forward. It is a respiratory pathogen, as you know. So we expect to see some kind of seasonal variation, just due to behavioral factors, but we haven't seen that yet. This virus thrives wherever we allow it, and we don't get that reprieve in those summer months or certain times of the year.
Meanwhile, all preliminary studies conducted so far on vaccine efficacy against the Omicron variant has shown that its neutralization antibody response was low. This reaffirms the need for a third dose or a booster dose to enhance protection following the traditional 2-dose regime.
Almost consistently, all of the lab assays have shown a significant reduction in neutralization with the Omicron variant, which means that the Omicron variant needs much higher levels of antibodies in the blood in order to neutralize it. At the same time, there have been studies that have been looking at the other arm of the immune system, which is a T-cell immunity or the cell-mediated immune response, indicating that there is protection that is likely to be retained because the T-cell responses are against a much wider range of antigens on the spike protein, and many of those have not been mutated in Omicron. So chances are that there is still a good amount of T-cell immunity, which should reassure us that vaccines will still continue to protect against severe disease and hospitalization.
Dr. Swaminathan also then went on to say that the need for a much more enhanced vaccine isn't currently needed, but it's at a discussion level.
WHO has set up a technical advisory group to think about the potential for changes in the strain composition of vaccines. We know that a number of manufacturers are already working on Omicron-specific vaccines, but in the meantime, WHO's TAG COVAX has been meeting regularly to develop the criteria for when a vaccine strain change may be needed, and if so, what should be that strain? What should be that consensus sequence? Because, even within Omicron, you have a number of different sequences of all of the thousands of sequences being uploaded. So the committee has to select the consensus specific sequence that manufacturers would need to use if there is indeed a need to switch vaccines. And that would happen if the current lot of vaccines are not providing enough protection.
US authorized Pfizer's antiviral COVID-19 pill for people aged 12 and older at risk of severe illness. It's the first oral and at-home treatment as well as new tool against the fast-spreading Omicron variant. Pfizer said that its medication Paxlovid was nearly 90% effective in preventing hospitalizations and deaths in patients at high risk of severe illness. The company added that recent lab data suggests the drug retains its effectiveness against Omicron.
Now then, the Civil Aviation Authority celebrated the 77th Aviation Day today with the patronage of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
The 77th celebration of international civil aviation was worked off this morning under the patronage of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the Civil Aviation Authority premises in Katunayaka. The event was also attended by Minister of Tourism Prasanna Ranatunga, State Minister of Aviation D.V. Chanaka and Chairman of Authority Upul Dharmadasa. During the event, the President also took in an exhibition of innovations related to civil aviation. The head of state also presented awards to 5 veterans in the fields of civil aviation in recognition of their massive contribution to their advancement of the sector. Further, a memento was presented to the President by the Chairman of the Civil Aviation Authority to mark the occasion.
Meanwhile, in other local news, station masters have decided to refrain from issuing train tickets from this midnight, saying that their issues remain unresolved. Chairman of Railway Station Masters Union, Sumedha Somaratna, notes that talks held with the General Manager of Railways yesterday did not yield the intended results. He added that though the State Minister of Transport had directed him to take necessary measures to resolve the issues in the railway service, the Railways General Manager is not responding positively to their requests, including the upgrading of the railway signalling system. Accordingly, the station masters will not issue tickets for regular trains except for intercity trains, which require seat reservations. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, Singapore's November headline prices have risen by their fastest pace in nearly 9 years on higher private transport and services costs, while the government also slightly increased its 2021 outlook for the measure. Headline inflation rose by 3.8%, exceeding economists' forecast of 3.35% and 3.2% in October. That is the most it has risen since February 2013. The core inflation rate rose to 1.6% in November on a year-on-year basis, the highest since January 2019 versus 1.5% in the prior month. The Monetary Authority of Singapore and Ministry of Trade and Industry said in a joint statement that core inflation is projected to average 0.9% for 2021, with headline inflation at 2.3%. Now then, Fitch Ratings has downgraded the rating on Sri Lankan Airlines Limited's $175 million government guaranteed 7% unsecured bonds due on the 25th of June 2024 to CC from CCC. The action follows last Friday's downgrade of Sri Lanka's long-term foreign currency issuer default ratings to CC from CCC. Fitch says that the national carrier's bonds are rated at the same level as its parent, the state of Sri Lanka, due to the unconditional and irrevocable guarantee provided by the state. Now, taking a look at the Colombo Bourse, the all-share price index closed 136.86 points higher at 11,951.23 today, while the S&P SL 20 index of more liquid stocks rose by 32.01 points to end at 4,251.53. Market turnover for the day was 6.6 billion rupees. Now here's a brief report on today's market performance.
Today, we saw the market extended its bull run for the second consecutive day, continuing from yesterday as investors regained their confidence in the market, where diversified financial sector counters and transportation sector counters were the main contributors, led the index up during the day. Accordingly, the index moved up by 137 points, recovering the early losses during the beginning of the week, while ASPI crossed 12,000 mark during the day before closing at 11,951 level. Today's bull run was mainly led by the active retail participation, and with that number of transactions also significantly improved to 53,000, which is considerably higher than the average number of activities. So we can see an intense level of participations in the today's market. Turnover recorded at 1 week high improved to 6.6 billion rupees, led by a joint contribution of a 41% from the energy sector and capital goods sector.
The Sri Lankan rupee, meanwhile, continues to be at 202.99 cents against the US dollar. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee fared against other major currencies during the day. 72 million year old dinosaur embryo has been discovered inside a fossilized egg, which scientists describe as one of the best preserved specimens of its kind ever found.
The embryo, dubbed baby Yinglian, was discovered in Guangzhou in southern China. It belongs to a toothless theropod dinosaur or Virotorosaur and is 72 to 66 million years old. Scientists from the University of Birmingham in the UK and China University of Geosciences in Beijing observed the embryo in a tucking position, which was previously thought to be in the pre-hatching behavior of birds.
So in modern day birds, they have a unique behavior called tucking. So starting from day 17, they will curl their body up with its head in between its legs. And then on 18th day, 19th day, until day 20, they will start to move into a final tucking posture, that is putting their right wing on top of its head. And this posture was suggested to help the bird stabilize when they try to crack the eggshell using its beak. And this behavior has long been thought unique to birds, but now we see evidence in our fossil that even in non-bird dinosaurs, they might have the same type of pre-hatching behavior.
The fossilized egg was discovered in late Cretaceous rock in 2000, but scientists have been examining it over the past 4 years when the embryo inside was found.
So this is one of the best preserved dinosaur embryos ever found and reported in science. And because it is so well preserved, we can observe its posture very clearly, which allows us to compare it with other dinosaurs as well as modern birds.
Now then, there is only less than 48 hours remaining for the dawn of Christmas. Now, in view of these festivities, here's our seasonal segment, The Message of Hope.
Thinking about Christmas, we find that there was a mix and match between the human being and the divine. Because of sin, the human being has drifted away from God, and there was no way in which someone could bridge the gap between the human being who is a sinner and the God who is holy. Yet, God found the way of doing that mix and match in bringing himself to this world as a human being while he was divine, and he became man while he was fully God. This is what we are about to celebrate at Christmas. Keep in mind, your sin, my sin, is not a problem for God. God, who is so holy, has come down to this sinful world so that the human being who has no way of coming out of his sin will be redeemed through the wonderful Savior called Jesus Christ, who is both God and man. May you meditate upon this during this Christmas. God bless you, and may I wish all of you a blessed Christmas.
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.